Hey guys, welcome to the channel. And for those of you that are subscribed, thank you and welcome back. Today on Minutemen Defense, we're going to go into more of a preparedness video. And so to give you a scope, there's a lot of things in the world that are going kind of crazy right now. We've got the Israel thing that just started popping off. I don't even want to start down that rabbit hole, whatever you want to call it, talk about what's going on over there. We've got the Ukraine situation that is ongoing and has been for over a year now. And there's other smaller conflicts around the globe, but you also have things internally, right? You have this crazy high interest rate, you've got housing market, and you've got, inflation, you've got all these first time things are happening in this country. You've got a lot of stuff that's happening that might cause you to be like in a heightened sense, a little bit, panicked. And specifically internal to the gun community, we have some, panic buying of ammo, heard about, plants shutting down, explosions, all these things that are making you unsure. And maybe I don't have enough stockpiles of ammo. So today what we're going to talk about is, instead of, hopping on the, panic buying toilet paper and ammunition, maybe a few other things we can look at, we can also prepare for, and we don't have to overspend on ammo. So if you're interested in something like that, stay tuned and we're going to break it down for you. Hey guys, so I got 5 categories for you, and these are how I see it, how I'm going to lay it out, and it's not going to fit all of you perfectly. It might not even fit most of your needs, but it's just something to get you thinking. So this first category is having a place to go, and this is something that, it's kind of a dead horse at this point. The prepping community has really beat this up. We used to have a TV show, Preppers or whatever, Doomsday Preppers, right? And people are out in the woods building bunkers and living on 40 acres in the middle of nowhere, and just happy as a clam building fortifications out of school buses. That might not be applicable for all of us. We can't all own 40 acres in the middle of nowhere. Certainly some of us do, and if you do have that, that's probably a good place to start. You have something that's secluded. The point really here that's been driven home by a lot of people is that you don't want to live in a super dense populated area during a time of panic, right? There's so many variables there that are just beyond your scope of control. It's probably not going to end well for a lot of people, and you'd like to not be in the group of people that's not going to end well for. So thinking about a place to go. So some of us that, might have a place to go, have a place prepared, a place where we know that, hey, if X, Y, or Z happens, depending on what specific scenario we're in, I'm going to go here, or maybe I'll stay here, right? So just start to, trying to think about a couple of solutions here. We don't have the ability to look into the future, so we don't know exactly what might happen to us, but we can come up with a couple of ideas pretty easily, I think, and then prepare a generalized plan, or maybe a more specific plan on what we would do in each one of those scenarios. And having a place to go, I think, is the foundation for that, right? So if you're in a rural area and you can say, well, I'm going to shelter in place, that might work out. You might live in a small enough area, you know a lot of your neighbors, maybe they're your family. You're like, hey, I'm just going to hang out here. I've got a lot of stuff here. There's a lot of resources, not a lot of reason for me to move on somewhere else. But if you are in one of those urban centers, high density areas, it might be best for you to go, a family cabin, something in the woods, something a little bit more remote, where you can go and, begin to start having some kind of better control over your scenario. So this is just to get you thinking about, all the other things are going to fall in, but if you don't have a place to go that offers you some protection, maybe a little bit of defense, just some remote, like a little bit of space, right? If we don't have something like that, a lot of the other things we're going to talk about just don't make any sense. All right, guys, point number 2 is having a support group. So this one's pretty straightforward. I'll try not to ramble too long about it, but it comes down to this. You're not John Rambo, you're not John Wick. You are more than likely an average person with an average skill set, capable of average things. So to expand upon that and increase your level of preparedness, it helps to have a support group, friends and family, people that you can trust. Really what it comes down to is people that share the same values as you, right? And that's gonna keep you having a deep level of trust amongst each other, right? As you're working towards the same goal. That being said, now that you know, have a support group, you're capable of a much greater scope of things instead of just one person, right? So you're by yourself. You know, you're capable of, you know, gathering food and water and doing all this, that, and the other. But who watches you when you sleep? You know, it's simple stuff like that. We're a social creature, and we're meant to have communities and support groups, right? So that being said, maybe you've already reached out to somebody, or you're going to reach out to somebody, and you know, I think you just need to analyze your own situation. What can I trust? What people do I, you know, I think share the same values? Maybe you have, you know, some friends or family who live on a farm, and maybe that's the start of a support group for you. Point number 3 is supplies. And this is probably the most straightforward, the one that most of you kind of default to, especially when you first get into like, oh, hey, I need to be prepared, right? So if you were being prepared for, you know, 2020 or whatever, maybe it was a ton of toilet paper, but these are the things that, you know, they're going to come straightforward to your mind. So, you know, you need to stockpile ammunition. You know, if you're going to own a firearm, you need to have things to put into the firearm, right? So that's pretty obvious, but I think the more overlooked side of it is what level of stuff are we going to stockpile versus, you know, what's really important to stockpile. Like for instance, you could have 100,000 rounds of ammunition, and good on you. You're never going to carry 100,000 rounds of ammunition. You're probably not going to transport 100,000 rounds of ammunition. So wherever those 100,000 rounds of ammunition lie, you might now be kind of anchored to. So maybe scale that a little bit. Maybe we don't need 100,000 rounds of ammo, especially when ammo is overpriced. You know, maybe we don't need any ammo right now. Maybe we'll just wait on the ammo. How much water do we have though, right? We can only survive a couple of days without water, and that's if we're not doing anything. If we're doing things, we're out there and we're sweating and, you know, we're putting in work and stuff, we're going to need a lot of water. And how many people do I need water for? And really, what's it take to store water? I mean, if you wanted to right now, you could go get some plastic jugs and fill it up out of the tap, put them in your, you know, in your closet. You know, that way you're not dying of thirst. You can just die 50 years later of microplastics or something silly. But you get my point, right? So you need things like water. You need a reasonable amount, whatever that reasonable amount is that you decide. You know, whatever is going to fit your parameters. Maybe you think, oh, I need a month's worth of water here, and then maybe I need 2 months worth of water somewhere else at a, you know, different location. Start to think about that stuff though. Water's simple. It doesn't really cost anything for you to go out there and store it, right? But how many of you have a bunch of it stored right now? Food is the next obvious one. I think a lot more people are in tune with this one. You know, canned goods are, you know, great. They last forever. Some people like to store MREs, dry goods like flour, rice. Those are really good, especially if you take the time to store them in the proper containers. But stuff like that is every bit as important as you going out and buying lots and lots of ammunition, right? You're gonna need to fuel your body. And that's kind of where I want you to think about this is, you know, given a scenario where you're gonna shelter in place for a long period of time, you're just gonna be living your life. So any things that you might need to carry on just your normal life, maybe you need some kind of medication or batteries or something of that sort. That's every bit as important to store as ammunition. So go ahead and make yourself a list of all of those supplies and how much of it you actually think you need in one location. Maybe store some extra stuff in a different location, maybe a location where you might bug out to, if you want to use that terrible word in 2023, bug out. Yeah, so that's point number 3, your supplies. Point number 4 is tools. So the most obvious of these probably is the firearm, right? We need tools to fight and survive. You know, a rifle can provide defense for you. You can also provide a way to go out and, you know, acquire more food. You can go out and hunt with it. So that's pretty obvious. I'm not going to go too deep on that one. I think we all have way too many opinions on what kind of rifles we need, you know, so on and so forth. Some of the other tools though, right? We might consider, if I'm gonna, you know, suddenly one day pick up and move to another location with minimal infrastructure out there, and then I'm gonna carry on perhaps the rest of my life at that location, I might want some tools, actual tools there to build stuff with. Maybe I'm gonna set up a place for people to come and gather for whatever reason, or I'm gonna build some additional housing or some kind of shelter to let people stay in. Maybe I'm gonna build something more defensive. I'm gonna build a bunker or something, but you can't do any of that without tools, right? And then if you're gonna use power tools, obviously you're gonna need power. So the things to set up the infrastructure that's gonna support you being in one location for an extended period of time, these are the tools I'm talking about, on top of all the firearms and stuff you're gathering, right? So some other tools we might consider is something to give us information about what's going on outside and what's going on around us, right? This is like radios, any kind of information gathering device. Maybe it's a drone for you to go out and do reconnaissance with, stuff like this that's gonna facilitate us actually being aware, because once you go out there, once you go out to the boonies and it's post whatever event, you're not going to be hopping on Twitter or X, or I don't know, I don't use Twitter, but you're not going to be hopping on the usual means of gathering information, so maybe doing some due diligence and figuring out ways to gather information now would be good. You can get those tools in line. Point number 5 is training. So this is kind of a broad scope here. This is physical training. It's really important that you have physical capabilities when the time comes, and not start trying to build those physical capabilities after the time has already come and gone, right? We don't want the first time we ever run a mile to be when our life depends on it. And that's something that's, fitness is free. I understand we all have our own fitness journey, so I'm not gonna harp on this one too long, but we all need to be in some kind of physically capable condition, so that way we can go out and defend ourselves and our loved ones, right? But enough of that. So then on top of that, we get the fun stuff, right? You gotta go out to the range and you gotta go train with whatever tools you're gonna have in the end of time, right? So you're gonna have to train with your rifle, or train with your pistol, train with your comm gear, train with your buddies. That's a real big one there. Have a lot of those weird things that pop up in training worked out, so that way it's not something we're doing when bad things are happening, right? But so there's a lot of things we can go out there and we can train for. And the point I really want to drive home with all of this, though, is, we're not training because, oh, hey, I'm paranoid that at any day now, everything could just come to an end. You're right, you could get hit by a bus tomorrow. You could die before any of this stuff popped off, though. Don't train out of a fear that, any second now, the world is going to end and you're going to, live in some weird post-apocalyptic movie for the rest of your life. I mean, that might be what happens, but I think the important thing is to not be afraid, right? I think it's important that you're cool and level-headed, and that you don't throw away the rest of your life. I mean, I'm not saying go out here and stop socializing with your friends and stop going out on Friday nights and enjoying a meal because you're worried about your caloric intake, or blow off hanging out with your family so that way you can go out to the range another time this month. These things are it's important to be prepared, especially in times that are a little questionable, right? But when is it okay for you to just stop living your life? I don't think there is a, pre whatever bad event, I don't think there's a good answer for you to just stop everything else that you're doing and just become some guy that's on a TV show building bunkers out of buses, right? I think what's important is that you have all these things and you prepare in such a way so that way you can give yourself a level of confidence and reassurance and know that, well, unfortunately, if things that are bad do happen, and they might, I've prepared some things, I've laid some things out, I've got some people I can trust. So I'm not going to live in fear of that day if that day were to come, right? So again, these are my 5 points. They probably don't fit for everybody. They won't fit for I'm sure a large majority of people who are watching this video, but at least it'll get you thinking about what am I going to do? I'm going to turn in and look at my own life, and what things am I going to change? What things am I going to prepare? And that's really what I want you to be able to do, because you don't have to go out today and panic buy a bunch of ammunition just because that's what everybody else is doing. It might make sense for them right now. Maybe they really need that ammunition, and that's why they're buying a lot of it. But for you, you can sit down and lay out a quick plan and think, okay, maybe I'm just going to focus on, I'm going to store some canned goods until the ammo prices come back down. And that's really what this video is about, is getting you to formulate your own plan and look at things from a perspective that maybe you haven't looked at them from before. So make sure you like, comment what you would do differently, and subscribe to the channel for more information like this.